Hi guys. This week's lesson is really focused on the visible spectrum. So again, that is the part of the spectrum that we can see, and so you can see here on on the screen that there's essentially a rainbow, and it has all the different colors that we can see. And yes, like things like brown and gray and pink are all in there too. They're just different levels of saturation and desaturation, and you don't really need to worry about that unless you are an artist, and then you can get all obsessed. But for physics, there are 8 colors that you are going to be responsible for knowing: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta, as well as white and black. All other colors we don't care about in this class, because all other colors are kind of just different variations of those 8. Um, so really, the our understanding of the visible spectrum and how it behaves is really shaped by how we perceive it, and a lot of that is really about how our eyes work, which is not necessarily the same as other species. So we're going to talk a little bit about human vision here, and hopefully that will get into explaining where some of these colors come from. Okay, so this is the back of an eyeball. So if you take a picture of the when I say back, I don't mean like the back of the outside surface. I mean the inside. So what I mean by that, this is your pupil, and light comes in through the pupil, and this part right here is the back of your eye. So on the inside of the ball, and the back of it. So that's what this is a picture of. This little spot right here is the optic nerve, where all of the veins are leading to that, and that optic nerve goes to your brain. And all of the back of your eye is filled up with photoreceptors. In the center, you see mostly cones. Cones help you see color. And on the outside peripherals, you have mostly rods. And so those are just different types of photoreceptor cells. Photoreceptor, photo means light, and receptor means receive. So these are the cells in your eye that receive light. Okay. Confession, this is actually my eye from a couple of years ago. They took a picture of it with a green laser, and the optometrist let me keep it so I could add it to my presentation. Yay! What we're looking at, again, that dark spot in your eye, I mentioned this last week, that the dark circle, the black circle in the center of your eye is not actually, there's no surface there underneath the lens, so you've got the lens covering it, but the pupil itself is just a hole. It's a hole in your eye, and that allows light to come in. So light comes in, remember, light has to enter your eye in order for you to see things. And that light hits all these photoreceptor cells on the back of your eye. So these gray ones, they're drawn here as gray, they are the rods, and most of the photoreceptor cells in your eye are rods, and rods help you see motion, and they help you see in low light conditions. So this is like responsible for your night vision. And then the cones, are responsive only to certain frequencies of light, and which means they only see certain colors. Okay, so they each respond to different colors. The distribution of cones in your eyes, we actually only have 3 different photoreceptor cones. There's red ones, and as you can see, if you look at this map, there are more red than anything else. Okay, there's lots and lots of red, and there's red everywhere. Red makes up about 2/3 of the cones in your eye, and then green makes up the other third for the most part, and then blue only makes up like 1 to 2% of the cones in your eyes. And notice you don't have any blue right in the center. The blue is mostly on the edge. There's lots of different explanations for why this might be. My own personal hypothesis is that red has lower lower energy because it's got a longer wavelength, and therefore red is kind of quieter. So you might need more receptors to detect red, whereas blue has a higher frequency, which means it has more energy, which means it might be kind of like a louder color. So your eyes might not need as many receptors to detect the same amount of blue as they do to get green or red. That's my hypothesis, just based on what I understand about light and seeing this. I tried to look it up, but it was beyond my understanding. So, yay! We're always learning. Notice also that there's a very uneven distribution of red, green, and blue, like just in terms of position. Yeah, as I said, the rods, there's a lot more rods. You have 120 million rods in your eye and only 7 million cones. And here's sort of your distribution of how much you have of each color. And here's what I mean by they're receptive to different wavelengths or different frequencies. So this right here is the range of frequencies that your blue cone is sensitive to. So it does get all the way down into green, but there's blue, and then it's mostly sensitive in the blue and violet range. So that's where your blue cone is. Your red cone starts at like 700 nanometers. That's a long wavelength. And it is actually sensitive all the way up into blue as well. And it actually, this one's a little inaccurate. There's actually another little hump here for red, which we'll get to later. And then here, green is in between them. So notice that these cones overlap, but really, red, green, and blue are the only colors that your eye can actually see and detect. And all the other colors come from combinations, right? Yeah, so if we only have 3 cones, where do all these other colors come from? So you see the blue here, you see the green and the red. In between you've got yellow, and in between here you've got cyan. I'm going to keep repeating those names so that you get familiar with them, especially cyan. Yeah. So we can actually experiment with this in real time. If you can get a red light, a green light, and a blue light, and you have like 2 lamps, you can turn the red one on and the green one on at the same time and kind of like shine them onto the wall, and you'll see what color they get. So if your red cone and your green cone are activated at the same time, you perceive that to be yellow. If you activate your red and your blue cone at the same time, your brain perceives that as magenta. Now, I know it looks kind of like a pink purplish color. This is a technical name. We're going to call this color magenta, and magenta is kind of special, so we're going to come back to that later. If you have blue and green, that combines to make cyan. Notice that this is very similar to a sky blue because the sky is actually not blue, it's cyan. Okay, you might say there's a tinge more blue on certain days than green, but it's much closer to cyan than it is to blue or green. So that's sort of the color of the sky. And it actually makes sense that the sky is cyan, because that just means that the light that's coming through is a mixture of green and blue light that gets scattered into your eye from above. And if you shine red, green, and blue light on a wall at the same time, you get white. And remember last week we talked about white being the presence of all colors, and so this result actually makes sense. If you get, since red, green, and blue are the only 3 colors we're actually capable of perceiving, if we get all of them, that would then turn into white, because remember, white is the presence of all colors. And as far as your brain is concerned, red, blue, and green are the only colors in existence. So that's where the spectrum comes from. And if you go back and you look at this rainbow right from the beginning, you can see there's the red and there's the green, and this is the part where the red and the green overlap. Here's the green, and here's the blue, and here's the part where the red and green overlap. And then over here we have magenta again. And again, magenta is weird, so we're going to talk about that more later. This is called additive color mixing. Like some of these results might seem kind of weird, right? Like usually when you mix colors, you expect colors to get darker. And that's because when you mix up lights, the rules are quite different than if you are mixing up paints or ink or any other kind of dyes or pigments. And so that has a whole different set of rules to it. But these are the additive color mixing. So when you add more light to a situation, it's going to get brighter. It's going to get more illuminated, so it gets closer to white. Again, these are the 6 colors plus white and black that you are responsible for knowing. Red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. They all are abbreviated with just the first letter of their name, except for black. Black is usually abbreviated with K. And the reason it's abbreviated as K is because B is used for blue in color theory. But you might be familiar with this if you have ever had to like refill the ink cartridge on like say an inkjet printer, because it will have C, Y, M, and K cartridges. That's cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. So remember remember if white is the presence of all colors, black is the absence of all colors. So if an object appears to be black, that just means it's absorbing all parts of the visible spectrum. Whereas if the object is white, it means it's reflecting all parts of the visible spectrum. Okay. I think this video is long enough. So we're going to move into subtractive color mixing in part 2. So again, these are the 8 colors you're responsible for. See you in a few minutes.